On my coaching calls, it's all realtors would talk about is, I don't know what to do. How do I get them to sign a buyer broker agreement? I don't know what to say. I don't know how to explain it. And I'm sitting there saying, I've been signing buyer broker agreements for years. Y'all are just catching up.
After decades of the status quo, in late 2024, the National Association of Realtors has completely flipped the script on the way that realtors get compensated for representing prospective home buyers. It's caused a lot of confusion out there, and people are asking the question, well, do I even need to have a real estate agent? Well, in today's episode, we're going to be breaking that down and helping dispel some of the bigger myths out there and showing you how to navigate that very complex question with some really tactical advice. In late 2024, the National Association of Realtors has completely flipped the switch. And for the first time in decades, well, at least in the 2.5 decades I have been doing business, the way that real estate agents get paid has completely changed. It's caused a ton of controversy out there, but also a bunch of misinformation. And like the question of the day for prospective home buyers out there is, do I even really need a real estate agent anymore? Well, today I have with me a very, very special guest, Katherine Materiale. Katherine has been buying and selling or helping people buy and sell real estate here in the Southern California market for over 22 years. She is the head of the Materiale group and a very special friend of mine as well as a business partner. But more importantly, someone that I could bring on today to talk about kind of a controversial subject out there. I'm very opinionated on this subject, and it's not always the most popular opinion out there, but it's my opinion nonetheless, and I know that Katherine would challenge me on some of the points I'm going to be making today. So I'd like to welcome Katherine here to this podcast. I just really appreciate you being here today. Thanks for your time in advance.
Oh my gosh, I'm happy to be here.
So, all right, late 2024, I think it was August, the National Association of Realtors just blindsides the industry and says, we are going to change the way people like you get compensated when they help people buy and sell real estate. Ton of misinformation out there. So help me break down exactly what changed.
Honestly, I think what changed is for the better, Dave, because I think really what's come from all of this is transparency. It's so funny because, you say that, everything changed and everything flipped when everybody else was freaking out about, and trust me, we had trainings that whole year, and on my coaching calls, it's all realtors would talk about is, I don't know what to do. How do I get them to sign a buyer broker agreement? I don't know what to say. I don't know how to explain it. And I'm sitting there saying, I've been signing buyer broker agreements for years. Y'all are just catching up. So for me, it actually didn't really change much in the way of my process. But what I think it did for the consumer is really healthy because it gave clarity. And I think clarity is essential. I mean, just look at all the lawsuits going on right now in regards to lack of clarity on a totally different subject. So this kind of started all of that.
All right, but for some of my listeners here, we really want to wrap our arms around kind of the novice, first-time home buyer or newer type home buyer who hears something like that, but really doesn't know what that means, right? Because they don't know what it was before, and they're hearing just a bunch of misinformation on how it is now. So prior to this big change, the compensation that a real estate agent received, the buyer had no visibility to that. That was something that was negotiated prior by the listing agent when they met with that seller and made the agreement to sell their home?
No, unless people weren't doing their job well. So again, like when I would sit down and do a consultation, I would discuss what my fee is, just like when you hire an attorney, I want to do a trust. This is what the cost is going to be. I would discuss that with them. And if the broker co-op back then, so, prior to when we would sit down with a seller, we would, discuss what our compensation was for them, for us representing them. And then we discussed what they wanted to offer the agent who was going to bring the buyer. But the listing agreement would have a total, like, for example, let's say they negotiated 3% to have their realtor represent them, and then they wanted to offer 3% to the agent bringing the buyer. The total compensation would be there, and then there was a paragraph that specified that a certain percentage of that would be cooperated with the buyer's broker.
Okay.
Okay, that went away.
Right. So if I was representing a buyer and I was looking at a list of homes that we would potentially go and check out this Saturday, I would know in advance that 123 Smith Street was offering 3% to my compensation and 234 Smith Street was offering 1%.
Only if their realtor disclosed that to them.
Okay. Was that the predominant methodology that realtors were using, though? Did most buyers agents have visibility to what their compensation was going to look like?
Well, the buyer's agent did.
Right.
The buyer did not.
No, of course, right. So I think that's what this is all about, right?
Yeah.
But is the change here is that the NAR, the National Association of Realtors, did not want the buyer's agent to be skewed by their potential compensation and potentially not show a very capable home for that buyer.
Rightfully so.
Right? Because they were going to make 1/3 as much compensation as this home, which may not be the best home for that particular buyer. So that's a huge part of the change.
Yeah, and I am certain that happened.
Oh, no doubt, for sure.
I'm certain that it happened. It was a conversation that I had with clients many times over. Now, I can only speak for myself. I can't speak for the practices of other realtors. But for me, my client and I, the buyer client and I, would discuss what my compensation was. And depending on, well, we'll just leave it at that. I mean, there's complexities, right? But then when we would look at homes, I would disclose to them, hey, just a heads up, this one is offering this one's offering that. And so therefore on this one, we would have an additional amount with your closing costs. But and I'm sure there were realtors that, number one, didn't do that. And number two, were swayed by the number.
No doubt. I mean, and I will agree with that with absoluteness that that many real estate practitioners out there chase the commission. In fact, people would come through. I'd be at office meetings in talking to big groups of realtors, and like one person would raise their hand and say, hey, I just took this listing, and by the way, guys, we're offering XYZ, or on top of the normal commission, another $2,500 bonus on top of it. So that it would be just ridiculous to think that was not a motivation for that buyer's agent to chase that compensation. So now, when that same buyer's agent is pulling that list of properties at that particular point, they don't necessarily know, right? Everything is kind of negotiable. So how then does an agent protect how much compensation they're going to make? What is the mechanism? What does the discussion with the buyer look like?
Right now?
Now, like post change.
My conversation is the same. So again, I think honestly what this did was this challenged the realtors that didn't know how to have that conversation with their clients to start to learn to have that conversation with their clients.
So what does that conversation look like?
Well, so when I have a consultation with a new buyer client, one of the things we discuss is my compensation. First, it's all about them, right? But once we get through what's most important, and that's their goals and how we're going to meet them, then we discuss how I'm going to be compensated in regards to helping them meet those goals.
Okay, so let's get specific. So let's say I'm a prospective buyer, right? And you're going to tell me what is like what is the contractual mechanism that is used to be able to kind of cement that in stone?
So the contract that I have with them will specify a duration that we're working together, and it'll specify what I am going to be compensated. A percentage, you can do it a percentage amount or a dollar amount, okay? And so we solidify that percentage amount. And the way that the contract reads is that if it's paid by anybody else, which can be the seller, or it can be a family member, whomever, then it will be reduced by that amount. For example, when we we'll say, okay, my fee is 3%. And when we go and get to the point where we write an offer on a property, we will ask the seller to compensate the buyer 3%, which then flows to me. So the compensation flows through the buyer to the buyer's broker. That is a negotiation point. And I explained to them, just like the price of the property is a negotiation point or different terms, the compensation is part of that. So we will look at the overall structure of the deal to get to a point where it makes sense for them. And so we go through that process. And if there is a portion that we can't negotiate from the seller, then it gets added to their total cash to close that they're responsible for.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to take everything that I just heard and I'm going to take it from like a super layman's perspective, okay? Because I'm a super lame person.
You are definitely not a super
Right?
lame person.
Okay. So here's what I'm hearing, right? Prior to this change, there was a complete lack of transparency unless the realtor chose to disclose to the buyer. But let's just assume they did not make that choice. There was no requirement at that point for the realtor to disclose to the buyer how much they were making on the transaction. So they had no idea if a realtor was pointing them at a home that was making that was going to profit the realtor more money than another potential home that they could have been seeing. Okay? In addition, they would go through the transaction, the agent would be paid and compensated by the seller at that particular point. In most cases, I understand.
By the buyer's or the seller's broker.
By the seller's broker, right? So seller pays seller's broker, seller broker cooperates with the other broker in question. So, and then that was just, in most cases, that's just the way that it went. So now, fast forward to today, we now have non-disclosure of any sort of idea of what the seller thinks. They may have already in their mind say, yeah, I'm going to pay, like I really want to have the most people come through the home, so I want this to be an attractive type of thing. So I know that I'm going to have to pay, as they should, compensation to the agent that's going to go find a buyer for my home, for sure. But the agent that is making this search of homes at this particular point, just off the information on the MLS, does not know what their compensation is going to be. Okay, so agent is going to now meet with buyer Dave.
I'm going to interrupt you.
Okay.
If they're good at what they do know what their compensation is.
Oh,
because
if they're
they've had
good.
that discussion. But to adjust what you said, what they don't know is what the seller has budgeted for in regards to what they're willing to offer.
Got it.
As a portion of that.
Okay. So, which has always kind of been the case, right? Because even prior to this whole thing, I know that there was some transactions where on the MLS, it listed a number that they were going to give the buyer's agent, but then in the course of making the offer, the agent was able to negotiate for more. That was allowed to be done.
Commission has always been negotiable.
Right.
We just have transparency.
Okay. So transparency is the key. So now my realtor, who I'm hiring to represent me to help me go find a home, is going to give me a contract that says to work with them one way or another, they're going to make X percent or X fixed dollar amount, whatever you said. Let's just say it's 3%, right? And I say, okay, great. You've given me your value proposition. I know you're the one. My family loves you. My wife loves you. We've had great discussions with you. We've interviewed a few people to do it, and we chose you. So we know that we're on the hook to pay this money now. But we also know that there are lots of ways to sort of skin the cat, right? We can potentially, and in most cases still, negotiate for the seller to pay all or a portion of that. But if there's a deficiency, then I know that that's going to be my responsibility as a buyer.
Yes.
Right? So it's transparency. So it was like lifting the veil of anonymity off the buyers and now putting them directly into the negotiation. And you know what's interesting is because there's a lot of hemming and hawing about this. Is very controversial, but we're going to talk about that later because it's controversial to a certain members of our real estate population, but other people are just like, dude, business as usual. Well, this reminds me of the post-2008 financial collapse in lending, where the Dodd-Frank Act came out. You know, it used to be the good faith estimate was like that we'd have to give a customer was like, dude, on like 3 pieces of carbon paper, and you'd fill it out and you like rip one off, like that's for you. You'd rip one off, you'd put it in your loan file, and then you kept one in your records. And like there was this terminology out there where loan officers would say, oh yeah, they're going to get charged a POLO fee. You know what POLO stands for? Pissed off loan officer. Right? So if you have like a borrower, no, seriously, if you have a borrower that's like, you know, like demanding and they're being a jerk or whatever, like you could just arbitrarily change the fees on the borrower. So then Dodd-Frank came out after the big financial collapse and said, we are going to standardize, we're going to regulate all for the purpose of transparency to the consumer.
It's a beautiful thing.
The mortgage industry frickin' went berserk, right? Berserk. I'm sitting here like, I've always only made that. Like, in fact, for me, it leveled the playing field, right? Because like a buyer just doesn't know what they don't know. So if they don't know that they don't know when they're not even being disclosed fees, and then they get to the closing table and they get this thing in front of them and they go, whoa. And like, what does a buyer do at that point? That literally like the moving truck is freaking circling the block. Right? If they don't close, they're going to get penalties. They're going to lose their deposit, all that kind of stuff. So they grit their teeth and they sign the piece of paper.
I think what all of this comes down to, Dave, is really, and I think in any industry, you have those who serve the client well, and you have those who serve themselves well.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt.
And what this has done is this has just created an environment where it makes it more difficult for those who just serve themselves well to hide.
I agree with that. It's super crappy that like that's even a consideration that buyers and sellers have to have out there, right? But I mean, unfortunately, it like our industry is overrun with bad guys. And it's just a travesty to people. But okay, so to the buyer out there, I'm going to oversimplify this, so don't punch me over here right now. But through the lens of the buyer out there, welp, the seller used to pay my agent. And in fact, I had a lot of agents who used to tell their customers that, like, oh, you don't pay me, the seller pays me, right? This is free for you. Because the seller is going to pay my compensation. Whether that's right or wrong or fundamentally correct, I have heard that hundreds of times over the last 20 years. Hundreds of times. So from a buyer's perspective, hey, this is a free service for me. Why not have an agent? To now, I have to pay that agent. That 3%, 2%, 5%, 20,000, 30, whatever it is, I'm on the hook for that. So now the buyer is asking themselves a question, a valid question. Well, what the hell do I even need this person for? There's a sign, that's the house I want, right? I read some statistic out there that says buyers locate like 70% of the time a buyer finds a house and says, oh, that's the one I want. And then the realtor goes out there and makes the arrangements to go look at it and then does all the realtor stuff out there. I know that doesn't happen all the time, but with the advent of the internet and all of the resources that buyers have, like the MLS is no longer this big secret book that like only realtors had access to. Like the consumer, if you have an iPhone, dude, you are in the hunt, right? Every night before you're going to bed, you're scrolling, ooh, honey, look at that one, look at that one, look at this one. Star, 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 and then your realtor gets that information the next morning. So now buyers are asking themselves, what the hell do I need a realtor for? Now, I think this confusion, because that's a valid question. That's a valid question out there. And what's the answer? Well, the answer really is it depends. But like, what is the reason that this confusion has gone from like asking just a realistic question and just understanding, like you just broke down how it was and what the changes are, and just using your own like thought process to decide if having a realtor is right for you, versus now this like social media assault on the real estate industry. You don't need a realtor. If you get a realtor, you're going to pay more for the house and all of this stuff. And like, I got to tell you, like everything else today, I feel like this misinformation is coming from scroll, scroll, scroll. This like TikTok nation out there of all these unqualified people squawking at people. And I read a statistic the other day that absolutely blew my mind, that like for people under 30 years old, 75% of people under 30 years old get their news from social media.
Yeah, the world has changed. But here's the thing, Dave. Bad news sells. And this is nothing new. Just the medium in which we're consuming it is transforming.
I agree. I agree it's nothing new, but what is new is the confusion from the buyer's standpoint.
For now, but that's why it's important for us to educate the consumer on what isn't misinformation. You're correct. By technicality, you don't have to have a realtor to buy or sell a home. I also could go online and Google and go into ChatGPT and try to figure out on my own how to do a will and a trust. Do you think that would go well? And thinking about the complexity of how I want to leave my inheritance to my children and to my family, and directives on how I want, all of those details. I am not educated in that way, and I'm not going to do a good job. When you hire a realtor, you're not hiring them to open a door. If you are, you need a new realtor. Because, yeah, I've had plenty of times where I've made tons of suggestions of homes to clients, but the one we end up on was a random one that was maybe, gosh, I'm thinking of Andrea, and she and her husband, we had seen homes, and then there was this one house that came back on market, and it was quite a bit over budget. So it wasn't on our radar, but it ended up being the one that I got for them. Does that mean that I didn't have the skill set to be able to help them through the process? Heck no, because showing the house is just the start.
Yeah, for sure.
It's everything from there that your realtor should bring to the table. And that's why it's important when you are looking at realtors that you ask questions, that you advocate for yourself, that you really challenge them, and you ask them for, gosh, I would even say, ask them if it's okay to call some of their past clients or current clients and ask what that experience is like, because it's the negotiation skills, you having someone to advocate for you. Because if you do call on the sign and you do talk to the listing agent, let's be clear. The listing agent represents the seller, not you. Their fiduciary duty is to the seller. Now, it can be done appropriately, but it can also be done very inappropriately.
No doubt.
And so you want somebody, I always say the same thing for new construction. The very nice salespeople in that office represent the builder, and they're protecting the builder's bottom line. You need somebody who's going to look out for your best interests, who's going to see the things that you don't see, who through their experience will point out things that you should be aware of, educate you, and empower you.
Yeah, look, you said something super pivotal, and we're going to get back to like talking about some of these fundamentals, because I think you really hit the nail on the head, right? People mistakenly, especially newer buyers, think that the realtor's job is to find the home.
Yeah.
And they're thinking to themselves, now, I don't need a realtor to do that because I have an Apple phone. I have an iPhone, and that has now replaced the realtor, which is obviously absurd. But again, we're talking about not two, there's almost 50 years between you and I here. Oh my God, there's almost 50 freaking years between us two sitting on these couches of experience.
Added experience.
Of experience in here. But we are talking about the 23-year-old first-time home buyers, right? And so what people are getting from like a consumption of information out there is that you don't need a realtor because you have all the tools that the same realtor has, with the assumption that that's the only part of the realtor's job, right? So we have to find a way to break that mold. But the problem is, how do we even get that stage to be able to do it if the consumer has already made their mind because of their 30-second little clickbaity, things that they're watching on TikTok, that they don't need you? So let me ask you a very pointed question, because one of the things that I've heard from a prospective borrower who I had the opportunity to work with and qualify for a mortgage, and they're absolutely wonderful, happy homeowners now at this point, which I'm happy to say. But when they first came to me, they were like, "Oh, no," because I asked, "Hey, are you already working with a realtor?" And it was like, "Oh, no. Right? We were told we don't need a realtor because now," and I tried to tell them, like, "Hey, listen, like, nothing has really fundamentally changed. It's really just now lifting the veil off of all of this. In fact, if anything, now you get to see what is happening, but nothing, it's always worked this way in the past." And they literally, and when they were talking about, like, "Well, I don't want to get on the hook of having to pay that realtor's commission." And I said, "Okay, fair that you're asking that question, but understand that, like, just like since the beginning of time of real estate, in most cases, the seller is going to pay all or part of that, and it's definitely part of the negotiation, and that's why you need a good realtor to help you with that." And they said, "Well, look, all they're going to do is stack on that realtor commission on top of the price. So if I have a realtor, bottom line, I'm going to pay more for the house."
Not true. I will say, from a seller perspective, because I represent buyers and sellers about 50-50, from just to kind of answer that question, but from a seller perspective, this has been a delightful change for a seller, because and I'm probably going to offend some realtors here. Sorry, not sorry.
That's okay. We try to be offensive as much as possible.
I do not try to be offensive. When I sit down with my sellers, it has not changed in that, okay, let's look at the overall budget. And we're looking at, okay, if we could get this dollar amount to this dollar amount for the house, depending on how popular it is, supply and demand, what is the bottom line going to look like? So we look at the different factors like the commissions, the closing costs, etc. Well, one of the things, for years, I've come with net sheets from different price points, but also with different commission amounts being offered to the buyer's agent, right? Because you want to pre-budget for that. Like you said, it's not that sellers magically all of a sudden aren't paying to cover buyer agent compensation. It's just the flow and the disclosure has changed. So now within that conversation, I can say, look, here's the thing. If we have somebody come with their buyer and they are experienced, they are a good negotiator, they're good at their job, if we get another Katherine come in, then they're very likely going to try to negotiate probably like 3% or maybe like 2.5% or something like that. But we may also, this is where I might be a little offensive, we may get Joe Smith, and this is his first house that he's selling, and it's to his sister, and he's like stoked to get 2%. So that gives us the leeway of when, depending on how the offer comes in, let's see where the offer comes in. We might be able to save some money to what we mentally and like we're budgeting for, and because of who is negotiating.
That's fair.
Right? So does that mean that a buyer is paying more or less? No, because ultimately what it comes down to is the seller is looking at their bottom line and the buyer is looking at their bottom line. Now, from a buyer perspective, typically there are two things that they're considering: their payment, or total monthly out of cost, like their mortgage payment plus their HOA, if there is any, and their cash to close, meaning their down payment, depending on what loan, but also what their closing costs are going to be. Well, there are other factors. There's also tax rate. There's all of these other different things. The commission is just a portion of that. So if you have a realtor who is skilled and can help you analyze and break it down, you absolutely, I have not had a situation where we can't structure the deal so that the buyer wins and the seller still feels like they're winning too. Because ultimately, when everyone feels like they're winning, then you have a happy ending.
So is it accurate? Is it accurate for me to say this statement? And I know that there's no such thing as absolutes, right? So I'm not
I was
trying
going to say, it sounds like you're going to be very definitive.
No. Yeah, so I sort of am. So let's just talk about the majority, okay?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the 80%, right? The 80-20 rule. So I know the 20% rule just takes a life of its own, but the 80% represents kind of like the standardization. So is there a time where a professional listing agent who obtains a listing contract to sell somebody's house sets the expectation that you are not going to have to pay a dime to another realtor who brings a buyer to this home to buy it?
No.
Good. Any other question than that? I was going to be like really challenge that, because I think that is unfortunately what buyers are thinking. They're thinking that that's the bottom line price, and that anything that's going to have to pay their agent is going to have to be stacked on top, which is why that thought process of if I have an agent equals I'm going to pay more for the house. And that is wrong.
Correct. So when I go, and at the beginning of this, one of the first things that I would discuss with people when we get to this point for sellers and buyers is, how have you been following, all of the lawsuits and the details? Tell me what you know of that. Because it was not uncommon at that point where a home seller would say, well, I've heard that we don't pay the buyer's commission anymore. And so then I would just, again, educate them on how it's been, how it occurred before, and just basically the slight changes of disclosure and transparency. And then I would discuss with them, okay, technically, you never had to offer compensation. They never did.
Yeah.
They could have chosen prior to that August to only compensate their realtor. But then the question is, okay, now, if a buyer is going to have to pay the total compensation to their realtor, you are now going to limit your buyer pool because they only have a certain amount of cash. Now, granted, you have a goal of how much equity you want to maximize, but the point is you have equity to work with. A buyer, their equity is the amount of cash that they've been able to save or that they're being gifted. And that is what they have to work with. If you are now eating into that, then you're going to have fewer buyers that would qualify for your home that now don't qualify for your home.
You know what I just heard right there? A reasonable explanation that if I was a home buyer, I'd say, oh, well, shoot, well, I don't want that, right? I want the most possible buyers to come here. I want it to be competitive. I want, of course, to protect our little nest egg. It's very important to my wife and I, but at the end of the day, we get it, right? But here's where I think the buyer's at a disadvantage, because most sellers, unless they have some cuckoo idea that they're just going to go out and do a for sale by owner, which statistically fails every time, you will get way less money for your home trying to go and freelance this own thing. But that's besides the point. I think that's that's a whole other podcast topic. Yeah. But at the same time, most sellers have to go through a realtor in most cases to list their home, which gives them an opportunity, a stage to be educated like that. A buyer doesn't have to. There's no mandatory discussion with the realtor before you make your decision on whether you're going to use a realtor or not, right? It's just a decision. Or a buddy saying, man, you don't need a realtor to buy a house. Look, I saw this thing. Go to this influencer who probably doesn't own a home, right? Or is not licensed or doesn't know real estate. It's just an opinion. And like you said, bad news sells clicks, right? So the more controversial you could be out there with that 20 seconds of airtime you get, the more clicks, the more views, which of course all these influencers out there are monetizing. So their goal is not to really educate somebody. Their goal is to get as many of those little blue freaking hearts as they can because they get a check at the end.
What platform
I don't know. I'm not on TikTok. Is the blue hearts not? That's Facebook where you heart something.
Hearts is Instagram, but they get blue.
I don't know. Whatever. You know what I mean? Thumbs up, hearts, friggin'. I don't know. But yeah. So and I think that's important. I think that's the fail point for buyers is that there's not like this sort of. And I'm not saying that's it's mandatory for a seller to talk to an agent, but like, if I want to sell my house, I'm going to call a freaking agent. I mean, that's just the bottom line in most cases.
The seller can do for sale by owner. A buyer can call on a sign. Both of those two things are facts. The question is, what outcome do you want? And how much do how much do you want to win? A home seller is not, as you said, is not going to benefit putting a sign in their yard and hoping and praying that somebody's going to drive past and want their house. A home buyer, if they call on that sign or they walk into the open house, again, I just reiterate, you need somebody who's going to fight for you and educate you and inform you. So how do we address the naysayers? Like you said, it's clickbait. I get it. Bad news sells. Well, it is our responsibility as the professionals within the industry to properly educate and inform and empower the consumer. That's what all this has come from,
Yeah.
is transparency and honesty. And about freaking time, man. Like, I'm stoked on these changes. And even all the things that are going on right now, which I won't, bring up, that's a whole other podcast, but the transparency should happen because there are shady realtors out there.
No doubt.
I have come across them and I have been in deals with them where I then fight for my client. I always say to my client, I am a mama bear. I am snuggly with you and I will protect you, but I will get my claws out on behalf of my client if I need to.
I've seen you do it.
And you need that. And
Yeah.
I work with a lot of first-time home buyers. And one of the things that I get a lot is, it didn't matter what question we asked. You never made us feel stupid. And we could ask the same question over and over again because I do this every day. I've been doing this for 22 years, but somebody who is kicking butt, buying their first house, I am stoked for them. They've done their research. Like, I work with some pretty dang smart people, but with as much research as they've done, they don't live and breathe this and dream about it like I do. And so it is so vitally important that you really align yourself with a lender and a realtor who is going to properly represent you.
I agree with everything you said. I just, in my head, I still have this, like, it's just really unfair to a buyer, especially a newer or a first-time home buyer, that where the standardized like step plan does not have to include, I'm going to go talk to a realtor. Whereas for a seller who already is an experienced homeowner, knows that, hey, if I want to sell this house, I have to call a realtor. And the population out there that I think suffers is the buyers, because they're left to take direction and influence from all of these other locations where it's just simply not the truth. It's clickbaity. It's designed for things. So like,
so what are you going to do about it, Dave?
Well, so here's what I'm saying. Like anybody who's watched this up to this point, if I'm a buyer, I'm still saying, wait, so do I need a realtor or not? Right? Like, I don't even think that we have necessarily clarified it. Like, I think of like what you need in this market. Let's look at 2026 upcoming. Right. So and then let's let people make up their own decision on whether or not they think they need a realtor. Because in my opinion, we are now and will continue to be in 2026 into the most, we're going to be in the most complex real estate market that I have ever seen in the 25 years that I have been doing this. Hands down. My father became a full-time real estate agent the day I was born. He quit his job. In fact, he left my house. My mom tells me the story all the time. He left home in the morning to go quit his job at Gemco. He used to sell like refrigerators, like heavy like appliances and stuff. And as soon as she drove out, she went into labor and I was born. And I was like, I'm pretty sure she was so freaked out with my dad saying he was going to go quit his job. But no, he had a wonderful, he's an old man now and just a professional grandpa to my boys. But he even tells me, because he stays really in tune with what's going on. Obviously, it's been his profession for his entire life. And he's just like, oh, shit. Like, this is some real stuff that is going on out there. And so I think right now, what is the complexity, right? Well, first of all, the complexity stems from the fact of political uncertainty, financial uncertainty, right? Affordability issues that we've never seen before, inflation, a fiscal policy, a United States fiscal policy over the last 3 years that has been unprecedented in the history of the United States, that has driven interest rates up, and coming off of a pandemic where the whole industry thought it was going to crash real estate, and it turned out to be the exact opposite, and people gained hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity. Like, this was some stuff that, like, no crystal ball forecasted that we would be here at the end of 2025, still like up to our knees in a bunch of uncertainty. So the population at the end of the day that really suffers from this is, your first time home buyer, your people that because of their job, maybe they're low to moderate income households where they have to work 10 hours a day and they can't keep their constant pulse on what's going on here. So how do we serve that customer, right? How do we get through all of this noise and really start breaking down the necessity of what they need to do to make sure they're equipping themselves against like these potential things that could happen? Because like we've dispelled a lot of myths here of like what social media is telling people versus the reality of the conversations that are happening professionally with sellers and realtors and all of that. So when you get in front of that buyer, what sort of questions should that buyer be asking of a prospective real estate agent in order to make a decision to align with them?
Excellent question. May I back up from there?
Yeah.
Let's just make this very tactical. So you are a home buyer wanting to buy your first home, honestly, any home buyer, but let's say you're a home buyer, you are wanting to buy your first home. You haven't done this before. Where do you start? Well, first of all, so even if I'm looking to find a realtor in another area for one of my clients who's moving out of state, one of the first things that I do is I ask the people who I know. Who do I know in that area that I know, like, and trust? That I know has a track history, and also will be a personality fit, because it's partial to the skill set, and it's also connecting with the person that you're going to be doing a pretty major home buying process.
Sure.
Okay. So who do you know, like, and trust? Who are the referrals that you can get? So ask the people around you. Don't just necessarily go with the first one that if dad says, oh, this is our realtor, you should just use one. Well, that realtor may be great for dad and mom, but it may not be a good realtor for you. Okay. So get referrals. And then I like to go online and I like to look at online reviews. So Google, Zillow, not Yelp, things like that. It's not like a restaurant.
What do you think the best platform for that is?
Well, I make sure all of our clients will review us both on Google and Zillow.
Okay.
Because let's face it, Zillow is where the majority of home buyers will look and start. There are other great platforms as well, but they do a really good job of presenting homes in a way that's easy to navigate. So get referrals. Second, look at the reviews. And then once you've and also on the maps, it'll show what areas that they serve. When you see that they are selling a lot of homes in that area that you're looking, it means they've been in a lot of homes. It means that they probably know those neighborhoods really well. Now, in regards to selling, it's different. So we are only referencing for buyers.
That's right.
It'd be a whole different answer for sellers because it comes down to marketing. But for buyers, you really want to work with somebody who knows that area well. For example, in our area, we get a lot of folks that move from San Diego or LA, and they will have a realtor from that area help them find a home here. But those realtors don't have the relationships with the agents up here. They don't know the intricacies of the different neighborhoods, that information, that local area information. So you want to make sure you pick somebody who is knowledgeable about the area, that can share those nuances that are important to you, because you're not just buying a house, you're buying a lifestyle. You have the things that you're doing in that area as well.
How important is experience?
Experience in what regard? I mean, all of it's important.
So tenure, like success in previous sales.
I will tell you that there are realtors who are newer that do a phenomenal job. So just because somebody has 22 years of experience doesn't mean it's 22 years of good experience.
That's right.
So it's not just the number of sales, it's the quality of the output they're doing for people. And that's why the reviews are really informative, because people will tell you what they appreciated about, and you'll see a pattern. Like, for instance, in my reviews, there is a constant of good communication, good communication, good communication. People feel like they are being communicated to. So that's your start. Once you have your short list of realtors that you want to talk to, and you can do this in regards to lenders as well. Once you do that, then you want to start making calls, having interviews. You can do it via phone, you can do it via Zoom, you can do it in person. It's whatever your preference is. And then have a list of questions. Come prepared with questions, almost like, I mean, it's a job interview, right? You're hiring them. So don't be afraid to advocate for yourself and have those questions.
I love how you couch that. It's a job interview,
It is.
right? At the end of the day. So maybe they should interview a few candidates before making a decision.
Now, if they interview one realtor and that person hits a nail on the head and they vibe with them, they can tell that they're going to do the job well. Don't interview realtors just for the sake of interviewing realtors. If you do a good job and you pick a good one right off the bat, then good for you. You
Yeah.
found that good connection. However, if you are uncertain, if you're walking away from that discussion with them and you're not 100% and there's something missing, number one, if you feel like they didn't answer a question, or if you feel like something was missing, it is okay for you to then, and actually that realtor, if they are knowledgeable, then they will appreciate you asking the questions of, I don't feel like you really addressed this, or what would happen with this. Then get clarity on that. You want to make sure you leave that appointment with them feeling completely clear on how they're going to serve you and how you feel about that.
Yeah, and I love that you bring up that, like, sort of stripes on your shoulder doesn't make you great, right? Being a realtor for 20 years doesn't mean that you're the right choice over somebody who's been there for a year. In fact, I've seen a lot of situations where that almost like works against you, right? Some of the newer people on the landscape here are more in tune with the challenges that buyers are facing today. They're more in tune with the economic difficulties. They have an understanding, at least a basic level, of what's going on from an affordability standpoint, and more importantly, how we can leverage this market to enhance those buying opportunities, right? Because I've seen, especially working like with your customers, where like, yeah, the market may be here, but because of the way that you're strategically setting up the offer price, we're able to deliver an exceptional product to the buyer because you're leveraging high negotiation skills.
Yes.
Yeah, so like if you're a buyer out there that feels like, oh, I'm going to go solo on this thing, and you are not fully well versed in getting in that fight and negotiating heavy, at the end of the day, you're going to lose, or at the very least, you're going to miss opportunity. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Right. So, I had a situation happen recently where we had an out-of-town borrower who was being represented by a realtor, and they called me and they just found us on Google, and they saw in our Google reviews much of the things that you're talking about: education, empowerment. They're quick, they communicate and communicate. And this person just called and said, hey, we want to talk to you about getting a mortgage. And we had a Zoom appointment, and we take them through a very specific process. It's not always a super fast process because it's a very thorough process, which leads to our empowerment hour with them. And during that process, we found out just how underserved they were being by their realtor. And they actually asked us for a local referral. And we gave a couple names out. They made some calls, and they ended up going with one of those recommendations. And I will tell you, just their level of comfortability from being represented from afar. And I don't think it was necessarily that this person was out of market. This person just didn't care. They weren't contacting them. They said, yeah, just go out there and find a lender. And go out there, find houses, and when you do, let me know, and I'll write up the offer, was basically how that other
lazy.
agent. It's just laziness.
Mm-hmm. Excuse me. Yeah, it's lazy.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get tactical, like you said, right? So do your research, put somebody into a job interview, and hire them based on your needs. I mean, is that oversimplifying it?
No, I think that puts it simply. And when let's come up with some questions that would be good. I think it'd be really helpful to give you some questions of what you can ask a realtor.
I love it.
So So after you've looked at the reviews, and so much of this depends on what's important to you too, and, are you a driver or what sort of personality? But I would ask, the general area and sharing a little bit about what you want. Ask them, what other recommendations they may have for different areas. And also, so part of the process that we have when we're going through a consultation with a buyer is we start with, okay, what is it that you need? But not just beds, baths, and square footage, but you also want to make sure that your realtor understands the overall feel of what's important to you, like what your non-negotiables are, and other things in regards to lifestyle. Ask them if they're familiar with the different property taxes in the area. Ask them.
What about market trends, how things are moving, what directions? I think a lot of buyers sort of incorrectly think that a house is worth whatever the listed price is. That's not always the case.
Ask them if they have had any success recently with clients on any particular strategies. For example, right now, one of the things that I'm telling buyers is don't discount the homes that no, two things. Well, this one I've said always. If there's only one picture of the house, or if the pictures are just cruddy, like it looks like the realtor took it with their cell phone and not even the direct, like correct angle, you might find a beautiful home that has been marketed poorly. So it's good to ask, are there any little tricks of the trade that you have learned that could help us win? And can you give me an example of where you have done that
I
for
love
a
it.
client?
I love it.
Because I have, like I say that the bad picture one as an example, multiple times over the years, I've had clients where they didn't pick a house on a list, and I'm like, okay, well, I know that's a neighborhood they like. I know it's hitting all the marks. It just doesn't have any pictures, or it has bad pictures. And I'll say, hey, I know you haven't selected this one from our list, but I'd like to take you to it. And the house is gorgeous.
Gorgeous.
And we get a great price on it because nobody's seeing it. And so therefore the seller has become more negotiable, and we were able to get a great deal. So asking for examples like that of the little tricks that could help them win will give them examples of of that realtor's experience.
I love it. It's unfortunate that most people, I shouldn't say most people, that a lot of people will spend more time discussing where they're going to go to dinner Saturday night than in choosing the right team who's going to represent them in arguably the biggest financial decision they're ever going to make in their life. So I love it. Like, I love that concept of an interview. And in an interview, you ask questions to make sure somebody is a fit. Yeah. And that's what I think is amazing. Understanding, the market trends that are going on there, strategizing what kind of opportunities might exist to meet their specific financial goals. I love it. I think these are all like important things. And we talked about, this kind of misinformation out there and this whole change that NAR made. And I think it's kind of ironic, right? Because who's going to suffer from a real estate standpoint? And the people that are really squawking at this are really the members of the real estate community that do not have a unique value proposition. They do not have an understanding clearly of market trends and how to strategize. They are not master negotiators. They relied on hey, you don't have to pay me. But all of the other people that represent the contrary of that, the professionals in the industry, they bring to that buyer you cannot quantify that representation and support in a matter of commission, because commission is a one-time thing. Getting into the right home at the right house under the right terms is a lifelong thing. And that's the fundamental difference. I know it's kind of a loaded question when you say, do I need a realtor? Maybe, maybe not. Well, look, I think if you want success in real estate, there's no question that you need to have the right representation in order to accomplish that. I think it's kind of silly otherwise to not believe that. But I also think it's equally as silly to not vet out who that choice is properly. Right? One of the things that we've done here at the Alevate Group, as you know, and that's one way that we came beautifully linked up with you, is that we really have to share in like core values with people. We are education and empowerment first. I tell customers all the time, if you're looking for quick answers that don't make any sense or it's impossible to validate right now, pick up a phone book and put your finger down. There's plenty of people that will give you the quick answer for the sake of the quick answer, right? We drive to education empowerment because in our experience, buyers have been forever been told by people like you and like me what to do. We like to flip the switch and put them in a position where they can frankly advise us on what is right for them. And then we can go out there and execute strongly and negotiate on their behalf. And that's what I love about working with the Materiale group for sure. And with working with real estate agents like you, we've put together a wonderful network actually of people that we share that commonality. And it's reflected in, I love Google in particular for reviews because I feel like if you do somebody wrong, they're going to go into Google and they are going to de-gut you. Right. And then they're going to and you can't buy Google reviews as well, which I also like. So a lot of people find us on Google and they're like, oh my God, it's not just the 5 stars or the numbers that you have, but it's what people are saying. And interestingly enough, we have a ton of reviews on there and a ton of, all of them actually 5-star reviews. But a lot of those reviews were given to us by people that, believe it or not, we denied for a loan. Katherine, right? Just because we spent the time, we put them in the driver's seat, and at the end of the day, we gave them strategic plans. And usually part of that strategic plan is making sure that they link up with people like you, and we show them how to do that.
I think what this all comes down to is we started this conversation in discussing transparency and clarity. So looping that back around, as someone who wants to buy a home, I think start with being clear on what you want and what you're trying to achieve. What is it that we want? Okay, yes, in regards to the house itself, but also in regards to where you're living, and imagine yourself, almost do it like a vision board. Like, what do you picture life being? And get clarity on that first. So once you have clarity on what it is, and also your financial goals, really understanding what is it that I know that I can afford. So know what you want, know what you can afford, stick to your guns, have clarity, and then through the tips that we've given today, and we can give more, find the team that will help you achieve that. And it with that, and if on top of that you can enjoy that experience too, you absolutely should. You need to have the team that's going to help you achieve your goals, but also you're going to be working with them for several months. You want to be able to connect with them and feel safe and secure with them as well, because when you feel like they are being transparent and advocating for you, and also when you like them, then it's going to make that process smoother, more effective, and in the end, it doesn't even feel like you were doing the work. But when you don't have clarity, and when you don't have the right team, and when you don't get along with the people that are working for you, you feel uncomfortable, you feel unrepresented, you feel unsupported, and you feel like you've wasted your money and your time, and you might even feel a little bit of buyer's remorse.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I do not want that for anybody.
For sure. These are big ticket items like we talked about. This is the biggest financial decision that people make. It takes a level of preparedness in order to position yourself to be successful with this. Can you think, I know you work with both a lot of buyers and a lot of sellers, but give us like 1 or 2 tangibles from an actual case study of yours where working with you impacted the success that they were able to have.
Case study. These are my peeps. Case study. Oh my God.
I'm technical. That's why I don't do what you do. I live in numbers, zeros and ones.
I admire you for doing what you do. So I got a call this is many years ago, and I received a call from Andrea. She was referred to me by another client of mine, Heather, I believe it was. And she just was at her wit's end. She and Jerry had been looking for a few months at that point at homes. And the realtor that they were working with prior, who they were just firing at that point, they didn't have a contract, but they were done. They were donezo. They found him online. They were looking online, they saw houses, they clicked on the button to show, which people do all the time. They say, I want to see this house. They think that by clicking on that button, they're getting the listing agent who knows that house and is going to answer the questions. But really what they don't know is that they're getting a realtor who's paying thousands of dollars every month to have that click lead to them. And they don't care whether they buy that house or another house. Anyway, long story short, they had been working with him and they had told him what they wanted. He wasn't showing them what they wanted. He was showing them homes way over their budget, wrong bedroom count. The homes did not meet their needs. So I had talked about being clear on what you want. Well, you want to make sure you have a realtor who is going to be on the same page with you. I have had this so many different times. But not only with that, she was getting frustrated with him and actually stood up for herself and was saying, you're not showing us the houses that I'm telling you that I want. The guy yelled at her. He yelled at her. And not only that, he made her cry. How wrong is that? And so she's telling me this story of what she's experiencing. And number one, just hearing her story, my heart broke for her. But now let's think of it from a buyer point. Let's think of it from Andrea's point there. So how does she know that I'm not going to do the same thing? So granted, she didn't necessarily ask the questions because I kind of pre-addressed her concerns up front. But if I had been in her point, what would I have done? I would have asked, hey, when we go through this, what is your process of knowing what I want? And how do you then take what I want and then relay that to me and showing me appropriate things? Now, I will tell folks that there are things that I, as a professional, may think of that they may not think of. They may see homes that they like, but what they don't know are the details of the taxes and the different things. And that home may be $500 to $1,000 more per month than what they want to spend, right? So ask the question of, how will you show me that the homes that we're going to be considering meet my needs? And then on top of that, how are you going to communicate with me? And what is your process of how you serve the client? Now, she didn't ask those questions, but I knew that that was a need that she had. And so therefore I addressed those up front. And we ended up, gosh, they're still in their home. I've watched their boys when I gave them keys, their boys, we always video them getting their keys. We videoed the boys opening the door, running through because they really wanted a house with a pool for the boys. And this house had one of those cool rock pools with the waterfall and the ledge to jump off of. And we videoed the boys running in through the slider and jumping in the pool for the first time. And that was that celebratory moment of really just honoring the thing that was really important to them, which was them and their boys and family. So I love now they go to the same church as us. We text all the time. You know, we have a great relationship with this family, and we've been able to build that bond over the years.
That's awesome. Just makes it all worthwhile at the end of the day.
But knowing what you want and then asking those questions of you know, how are you going to serve me is going to make a difference.
You know, Katherine, one of the areas that we've seen maybe unprepared agents or incapable agents really impact negatively the experience for the borrower is, they work with their lender, they work with us, and we develop their buy box from an affordability standpoint, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about the house they want, it's about the house they want and that they can afford.
Sure.
And a lot of times there's a disconnect between my side of the business and people who are doing your side of the business. So I know that, you have an actual process. It's part of your unique value proposition, right? To prevent that from happening. So explain what your process looks like a little bit once that lender representing the buyer develops that buy box, and then you take that out to the street to find them a home.
In referring to budget specifically?
It's specifically to budget. Yeah, no. It's specifically to their affordability of the home.
So specifically to budget, let's talk about Josh and Destiny. They are a recent,
for sure,
really sweet couple that we just helped. We just gave them keys like a month ago. So they had a very clear budget of what they were trying to stick to, but they also had clarity on what it was that they wanted in a home. So one of the things that I do is when we come down to, we do it in layers. So we'll narrow down to potential properties that we want to target that they will choose. So they'll say, okay, we'll provide them with a list of homes. They look through, and then and I say, don't worry about pricing, don't worry about any of the details. I will then add that layer after. So they just pick the ones that they think are pretty. That's simple as that. They go through, they pick the ones that they think are pretty. Okay. And then from there, I then narrow down based off the things that they've told me that are important to them in regards to the house. I'll say, okay, you said you didn't want to back up to a busy road. I can see that, and this is what I know. Then we'll narrow down based off of the needs and the things that they've shared with me that are important in regards to a home or area, or etc. From there, then we take that list. And now I used to do the math myself prior to working with you. Now y'all do the work for me, which is delightful. But then I give that list to you, and you guys come back to us, and you've sent these amazing emails where it includes taxes, HOA, and everything based off the loan structure that they're doing and where rates are as of that day. And you'll say based on this rate. Then they have an idea of what their payment will look like and what their cash to close will look like. We then take that, put that filter over the list, and we have them remove any that, and I'll say, now we may get the home for a little less or we may get the home for a little more, but this is based off the list price. So based off of what you share, now we narrow down that list even more. Then we have our target list, and from that list, that's what we go look at. So when they walk into that home, they already know that it's in budget.
Josh was so amazing during that process, right? Because so I was going to say his wife was about to pop with their baby, but she did pop. She had the baby right before we closed escrow, which was amazing.
Yep.
And, but I remember he shared with me one time, he said, man, the fact that you guys are like breaking down all of the fundamentals, even before we take the time to go out there and look at the house, was a huge differentiator. He like specifically called and was like so thankful for that. And, we offer that to lots of real estate professionals that we work with. A lot of them we don't know, right? Because we work with the buyer and they have found their own agent or a legacy family friend. And I tell the agent, like, hey, listen, I don't care if it's 10 or 100. We are going to break these properties down, like fundamentally down to the HOA, to make sure the customer understands the before they even go out there. Because if it's outside of their level of comfortability, we don't just want their emotion to override the fundamental facts of their financial sitting. And I'll tell you, like, very few take me up on that. They go find the house first, and then I'm the afterthought. Whereas, the money, it has to be one of the forefront things. And
be prepared.
Yeah,
and provides confidence.
They're so amazing, and they're gonna do so great in that house. I love all the tips that we've provided here today. I think it's a little bit discounting to call them tips. I think they're essentials. I think you absolutely have to dig in and ask the right questions, interview properly, make sure you're dealing with an appropriate market strategist who can negotiate and help you utilize this sort of complicated market to end up ultimately with the terms that suit your goals. So I love it. Katherine, thank you for being here. I mean, one of the reasons why I wanted you to come on here specifically is that I know you run an incredible organization and you follow process flow, and you're able to illustrate to a potential buyer who asks you, why are you, Katherine? What's your differentiator? Why are you right for myself and my family? Because there's a lot of options for us. You actually have deliverables to be able to do it. I think that is few and far between in our industry, both your side and my side of it. And I like to align with people in a network that shares that commonality. I'm not scared of that question when a customer asks me, why you? In fact, if they don't ask me, why us? I ask the question, you're probably wondering why you should pick us as far as representing you through this immense thing of your life. And we're very happy to spend an appropriate amount of time to tell them exactly that. So you're the best, you're awesome, and I just really appreciate this time here
Thanks
today.
for having me. I appreciate it.
You're the best.